The blood that buys everything. They said she threw away her life the moment she touched him. A human healer kneeling over a dying wolf in forbidden territory. That's how wars start. How bloodlines end. How fools get buried without names. But Alara Vance didn't care about their rules. She had one vial of medicine left, the kind that could save a life or destroy hers, and she used it on a creature that should have torn her apart. By morning, 100 wolves stood at her door. Their message was simple. You saved our prince. Now, you belong to us. If you want to see how one choice can shatter everything, stay until the end. Like this video, comment your city, and let's go. The forest had a smell that morning, wet iron and turned earth, like something had been killed and left to rot. Alara Vance knew that smell. She'd grown up on the border, where human settlements ended and the wild began, where children learned young that certain paths weren't walked after dark, and certain sounds meant you ran. She wasn't running now. Her boots sank into the mud as she pushed through a thicket of blackthorn, branches scraping her arms through the thin fabric of her coat. The medical bag banged against her hip, heavy with supplies she'd stolen from the clinic before dawn. Her mentor would have beaten her for this. The town council would have locked her up. But Alara had stopped caring about what they'd do 3 miles back when she'd heard the sound. Not a howl. Wolves didn't howl when they were dying. They made a noise like grinding metal, like something breaking from the inside. She found him in a clearing where the trees opened up to gray sky. The wolf was massive, easily the size of a workhorse, black fur matted with blood that looked almost purple in the dim light. His side had been torn open, not by claws or teeth, but by something deliberate. Blades, traps. The kind of wounds humans made when they wanted something to suffer before it died. Alara dropped to her knees beside him, mud soaking through her pants. His eye cracked open. Just one, the other was swollen shut. Gold. Bright as a coin, bright as fire. It fixed on her face, and she felt the weight of it, the intelligence behind that stare. You're going to die if I don't help you, she said quietly. The wolf's chest heaved, a rattling breath. And I might die if I do. She opened her bag. Her hands were shaking. She hated that they were shaking, but she pulled out the vial anyway. The glass was warm against her palm, filled with liquid that shimmered faintly, even in the poor light. Seraphite extract. Rare. Expensive. Illegal to use on anything that wasn't human. Her mentor had told her once, that medicine is worth more than your life, girl. Don't waste it on something that can't pay you back. Alara uncorked the vial. The wolf made a sound, low and broken. I know, she whispered. I know it hurts. She tipped the vial against his muzzle, and the wolf didn't fight her. His tongue lapped weakly at the liquid, swallowing in desperate, uneven gulps. The rest she poured directly into the worst of the wounds, watching the torn flesh shiver and begin to knit, slower than it should have. But enough. Enough to stop the bleeding. Enough to give him a chance. When the vial was empty, Alara sat back on her heels, breathing hard. The wolf's eye closed. For a long moment, she thought she'd been too late. Then his chest rose, steadier this time, and the shaking in his limbs eased. Alara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. You're welcome, she muttered, shoving the empty vial back into her bag. She should have left then, should have stood up, walked back through the forest, and pretended this never happened, but her legs wouldn't move. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the way the wolf's breathing had evened out, like he was actually going to survive. She stayed until the sky turned pale. When she finally stood, her knees screamed in protest, and her back ached from crouching too long. She took one last look at the wolf, still breathing, still alive, and turned toward the path home. That's when she heard it. Not one sound. 100. Footsteps. Paws on wet earth. The rustle of bodies moving through underbrush. Alara froze. They came from every direction, slipping out of the trees like shadows given form. Wolves, dozens of them, more than she could count. They circled the clearing, silent except for the soft padding of their steps, and every single one of them was watching her. Her heart kicked against her ribs. One of them stepped forward, a wolf nearly as large as the one she'd saved, but older, scarred, with fur the color of old ash. His eyes were pale, almost white, and they pinned her in place like a blade through cloth. Alara's hand went to the knife at her belt. The lead wolf's lips pulled back, showing teeth. Then he did something she didn't expect. He bowed. Not a crouch. not a threat. A bow. Head lowered, neck exposed. And one by one, every wolf in the clearing did the same. Alara's breath came in short, shallow gasps. Her hand was still on the knife, but her fingers had gone numb. The lead wolf lifted his head and looked past her, to the black wolf still lying in the mud. Then he looked back at her, and when he spoke, the voice that came out wasn't a growl. It was human. "You saved him." Alara's vision blurred at the edges. She blinked hard, trying to process what she was hearing. The wolf's mouth hadn't moved, not the way a human's would, but the words were clear, low and rough, like gravel scraped across stone. "You saved the heir of the Draven pack." Her throat closed up. "I didn't—" She stopped. Her voice cracked. "I didn't know." The lead wolf's pale eyes didn't blink. "It doesn't matter. You used your medicine. You gave your aid. By our law, you have bound yourself to him." "I don't understand." "You will." The world tilted. Alara staggered back a step, and the circle of wolves tightened, not threateningly, but like a net closing. She looked down at the black wolf, the heir, and his golden eye opened again, fixed on her with something she couldn't name. "I didn't agree to anything," she said, louder this time, anger cutting through the fear. "I just didn't want him to die." The lead wolf's expression didn't change. "That is why the bond holds." "I'm going home." "No," the wolf said simply. "You're coming with us." Alara pulled the knife free. It was a small blade meant for cutting bandages and trimming herbs, but she held it like a weapon. "Try to stop me." For a moment, no one moved. Then the black wolf, Kael, she would learn his name was Kyle, made a sound. A huff, sharp and deliberate. The lead wolf glanced at him, then back at her. "He says you can walk, or we can carry you." The wolf's tone was flat. "He would prefer you walk." Alara's hand shook. "And if I refuse?" "Then you'll be carried." She looked at the knife in her hand, looked at the 100 wolves surrounding her, looked at the black wolf, still too weak to stand but alive because of what she'd done. Slowly, she lowered the blade. "Where are you taking me?" "To the den," the lead wolf said. "Where you will answer for what you've done." "I saved him." "Yes." The wolf's pale eyes gleamed. "And now you'll learn what that means." Well, the journey took hours. They moved through the forest in silence, the wolves forming a loose escort around her. No one touched her, but she felt their presence like pressure against her skin, a constant reminder that running wasn't an option. Alara kept her eyes on the path, her mind racing. She knew the stories. Every kid on the border knew them. Wolves that walked like men, packs that ruled the deep woods, territories marked in blood. But stories were one thing, meant to scare children into staying close to home, and this was something else entirely. The black wolf, Kael, was carried on a platform of woven branches, borne by 4 of the largest wolves she'd ever seen. He didn't wake during the journey, but his breathing stayed steady, and that was enough. By the time the trees opened up, the sun was high. The den wasn't what she expected. It wasn't a cave or a ruin. It was a settlement, crude but organized, built into the side of a rocky hill. Structures made of wood and stone, covered in hides and moss, some half buried in the earth. Smoke rose from a central fire pit, and the air smelled like roasting meat and pine sap. Wolves moved between the structures, some on 4 legs, some on 2. Alara stopped walking. The lead wolf glanced back at her. "Keep moving." "There—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Shifting takes effort," the wolf said. "Most don't bother unless they need hands." She watched a young wolf, sleek, rust-colored, stand up on his hind legs, bones cracking and reshaping, until a teenage boy stood where the wolf had been. He scratched his ribs, yawned, and walked into one of the structures without a second glance. Alara swallowed hard. The lead wolf led her to the center of the settlement, where the fire pit burned low and steady. Wolves gathered around it, watching her with eyes that ranged from curious to hostile. Kael was laid down on a flat stone near the fire, and an older female, gray-furred, scarred across the muzzle, immediately bent over him, sniffing at his wounds. The lead wolf shifted. It happened fast, too fast for Alara to look away. Bones snapped and reformed, fur receded, limbs stretched and reshaped, and then a man stood where the wolf had been. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with scars that ran across his chest and arms like a roadmap of violence. His hair was the same ash gray as his fur had been, cropped short, and his pale eyes hadn't changed. "My name is Garen," he said, his voice the same gravel rough tone she'd heard in the clearing. "I lead this pack." Alara forced herself to meet his gaze. "Then let me go." "No. I didn't ask to be here." "You saved him." Garen gestured to Kael. "That makes you responsible." "Responsible for what?" "His life." Garen stepped closer. "You used human medicine on one of us. Medicine we don't have, don't understand, and can't replicate. If he lives, it's because of you. If he dies, it's because of you." Alara's jaw tightened. "He's not going to die." "You don't know that. I know what I used. I know how it works." Garen studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to the gray-furred female still examining Kael. "Mira?" The female shifted. Another blur of movement, another rearrangement of bone and flesh. And an older woman stood in her place. She was lean, hard-muscled, with gray hair pulled back in a braid, and the same scars across her face that had marked her wolf form. "He'll live," Mira said bluntly. "Whatever she gave him stopped the worst of it, but he's not out of danger yet. These wounds weren't meant to kill quickly. They were meant to cripple." Garen's expression darkened. "Torven's work." Mira nodded. Alara looked between them. "Who's Torven?" "Someone who wants Kael dead," Garen said. "Someone who'll want you dead now, too." Her stomach dropped. "Why?" "Because you saved him." Garen's pale eyes locked onto hers. "And that means you've chosen a side." They gave her a space to sleep, a small structure at the edge of the settlement, barely big enough to lie down in. No lock on the door, but 2 wolves stationed outside, watching. Alara sat on the rough floor, her back against the wall, and tried to think. This was insane. All of it. She should have left the wolf in the clearing, should have kept walking, should have... A sound outside. She tensed. The door pushed open and Mira stepped inside, carrying a wooden bowl filled with something that smelled like roasted venison and wild onions. "Eat," Mira said, setting the bowl down in front of her. Alara didn't move. "I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway." Mira sat down across from her, cross-legged, like she had all the time in the world. "You'll need your strength." "For what?" "For whatever comes next." Mira's dark eyes were sharp, assessing. "You're not pack. You're not blood. But you saved the air, and that makes you complicated." Alara finally reached for the bowl, more to have something to do with her hands than because she wanted food. "I didn't mean to complicate anything." "Doesn't matter what you meant." Mira leaned back. "You did it. Now you live with it." "What happens if I try to leave?" "You won't make it past the tree line." Alara took a bite. The meat was tough, gamey, but warm. She swallowed. "So I'm a prisoner." "You're a debt." Mira's tone was matter-of-fact. "Until Kael wakes and decides what to do with you, you stay here. That's the law." "Your law, not mine." Mira smiled, and it wasn't kind. "You're in our territory now, girl. Our law is the only one that matters." Alara set the bowl down. "What if he doesn't wake up?" "Then you'll have bigger problems than being a prisoner." The weight of that settled over her like a shroud. Mira stood, brushing off her pants. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow, you'll meet the pack properly. They'll want to see the human who saved their prince." She left without another word. Alara sat alone in the dark, listening to the sounds of the settlement outside, low voices, the crackle of the fire, the occasional howl in the distance. She thought about the black wolf, Kael, the way his golden eye had looked at her, like he was seeing something she didn't know was there. What have I done? But the answer was already written. She'd made a choice in that clearing, and now she was bound to it, bound to him, in ways she didn't understand yet. Outside, one of the wolves guarding her door let out a low growl. Alara closed her eyes and tried to sleep. She woke to shouting. Alara bolted upright, heart hammering, disoriented in the gray pre-dawn light filtering through gaps in the wooden walls. The voices outside were sharp, angry, overlapping in a language she didn't understand, guttural and clipped, more growl than speech. She pushed to her feet, legs stiff from sleeping on the hard ground, and moved to the door. One of the wolves guarding her, a young male with rust-colored fur, turned his head and growled low in warning. Alara ignored him and stepped outside. The settlement was awake, but it wasn't the usual morning activity. Wolves had gathered near the central fire pit, a tight circle of bodies, some shifted to human form, others still on four legs. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. Garen stood at the center, his scarred chest bare despite the cold, arguing with a wolf Alara hadn't seen before. A massive brute with dark brown fur streaked with silver, his muzzle pulled back to show teeth like broken glass. "She doesn't belong here," the brown wolf snarled, the words coming out rough but clear. "This is pack business. Human business ended the moment she crossed into our territory." "She saved him," Garen said, voice flat and unyielding. "That makes it pack business. She used human medicine." The brown wolf spat the words like a curse. "We don't know what that poison will do to him. For all we know, she's killed him slower than Torvin's blades would have." Alara's hands curled into fists. Garen's pale eyes flicked toward her just for a second, then back to the wolf in front of him. "Mira says he'll live." "Mira's not a healer. She's a fighter who knows how to stitch wounds." The brown wolf stepped closer, lowering his head in a posture that looked like a challenge. "You're risking the pack for a human who doesn't understand what she's done. She understood enough to save his life when no one else could. Or she's bound him to her with something we can't undo." The crowd shifted, murmurs rippling through the pack. Alara caught fragments, debt, bond, unnatural, and felt the weight of every eye that turned her way. Garen raised a hand and the murmurs died. "Enough. The law is clear. She gave aid. The debt is real. Until Kyle wakes and speaks for himself, she stays." The brown wolf's lips curled. "And if he doesn't wake, then we'll deal with it." "You mean you'll deal with it?" The wolf's tone turned mocking. "Because you're so good at making hard choices, aren't you, Garen?" The air went cold. Garen didn't move, but something shifted in his posture, something that made the wolves nearest him take a step back. "Careful, Wraith," Garen said softly. "You're close to a line you don't want to cross." Wraith bared his teeth. "I crossed it the moment you let her in." For a heartbeat, Alara thought Garen would lunge. His shoulders tensed, muscles coiling, and the violence in the air was so sharp she could taste it. Then Mira stepped between them. She was still in human form, dressed in worn leather pants and a sleeveless tunic that showed the scars running down her arms. Her gray braid hung over one shoulder, and her expression was as hard as stone. "Both of you stop." She looked at Wraith first. "You want to challenge Garen? Do it properly, not like this." Wraith's growl deepened, but he didn't move. Mira turned to Garen. "And you? Don't give him an excuse." Garen's jaw worked, but he nodded once. Mira glanced at Alara, then back at the gathered pack. "The human stays until Kyle wakes. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me." No one spoke. Mira's gaze swept the crowd, daring someone to argue. When no one did, she jerked her head toward Alara. "You, come with me." Alara hesitated, then followed. Mira led her away from the fire pit through the settlement to a structure larger than the others, half buried in the hillside, with a low entrance covered by a heavy hide. She pushed it aside and gestured for Alara to enter. Inside, the air was warmer, thick with the smell of herbs and smoke. Kyle lay on a raised platform of stone and fur, still unconscious, his black fur matted but clean. Someone had tended to him while Alara slept. The worst of the wounds were bandaged with strips of leather and moss, and his breathing was steady. Alara moved closer, her trained eye cataloging the injuries. The deep gash along his ribs had closed, but the flesh around it was still inflamed. His left foreleg was splinted, the bone likely fractured. Bruising darkened the skin beneath his fur, spreading across his shoulder and down his flank. "He looks worse than yesterday," Alara said quietly. "He's healing," Mira replied, "but it's slow. Too slow." Alara knelt beside the platform, reaching out to check the bandages. Her fingers brushed against Kyle's fur, and his ear flicked. "He can hear you," Mira said. Alara pulled her hand back. "Can he understand me?" "Probably." Mira crouched down on the opposite side of the platform. "Wolves don't lose their minds when they shift. He's still in there." Alara looked at Kyle's face, eyes closed, muzzle slack. It was strange seeing him like this. Vulnerable. The creature that should have terrified her, reduced to something she wanted to protect. "What happens if he doesn't wake soon?" Alara asked. Torvin will come for him. Mira's tone was matter of fact. And this time, he'll finish what he started. Alara's stomach twisted. Who is Torvin? Kael's cousin. Mira leaned back on her heels. Second in line to lead the pack. He wants that position badly enough to kill for it. Why didn't anyone stop him? Because he didn't challenge Kael openly. He set a trap, made it look like an ambush by humans. Mira's expression darkened. By the time we found Kael, Torvin was already back at the den, playing the concerned family member. Alara frowned. And no one questioned it? Some did. But without proof, Garen couldn't act. Pack law requires evidence or a formal challenge. Torvin's too smart to give us either. So he just gets away with it? For now. Mira met her eyes. Unless Kael wakes and calls him out. Alara looked down at the black wolf, her mind racing. How long does he have? Days, maybe a week. Mira stood. After that, the pack will start asking questions Garen can't answer, and Torvin will push for a succession vote. Even though Kael's not dead? If he can't fight, he can't lead. That's the law. Mira moved toward the entrance, then paused. You want to help him? Figure out how to wake him up. Because if he stays like this much longer, you saving his life won't matter. She left, the hide falling back into place behind her. Alara sat alone with Kael, the weight of the situation pressing down on her like a physical thing. She'd saved him. And now, somehow, that wasn't enough. The next 3 days blurred together. Alara spent every waking hour in the healing den, monitoring Kael's condition. She changed his bandages, applied poultices made from herbs Mira brought her, and checked his vitals with the limited tools she had. His wounds were healing, but slowly, too slowly for a wolf, Mira said. Something was wrong. The pack watched her work with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. Some kept their distance, muttering in their language whenever she passed. Others, mostly the younger wolves, would linger near the entrance, peering inside with wide eyes. One of them, a girl who couldn't have been more than 15 in human years, shifted and approached her on the second day. Is he gonna die? The girl asked, her voice small. Alara looked up from where she was crushing yarrow root in a stone bowl. No. Are you sure? Yes. The girl chewed her lip. Wraith says you poisoned him. Alara's hand stilled. Wraith's wrong. But you're human. Humans kill wolves. Not this one. The girl studied her for a long moment, then nodded and left. That night, Alara barely slept. She sat beside Kael's platform, watching the rise and fall of his chest, listening to the sound of his breathing. Every few hours, she'd check his wounds, looking for signs of infection or fever. There were none. Physically, he was improving, but he wasn't waking. By the 4th day, her patience snapped. Why won't you wake up? She muttered, pressing her palm against Kael's side. His heart beat steady and strong beneath her hand, but his eyes stayed closed. Come on. I didn't save you just so you could sleep through the fallout. No response. Alara sat back, frustration boiling over. She'd done everything she could with what she had. The Seraphite had stopped the bleeding and jump-started his healing, but something was holding him under. Shock, maybe. Trauma. Or something else she didn't understand. She needed more information, more tools, more medicine, which meant going back. The thought hit her like a fist. She couldn't do it. The town was half a day's walk through hostile territory, and even if she made it, the clinic would be locked down by now. Her mentor would have reported the missing supplies. The council would have questions, but Kael needed more than what she could give him here. Alara stood, decision crystallizing. She grabbed her bag, mostly empty now, and headed for the entrance. Garen was waiting outside. He was in human form, arms crossed, blocking her path. Where do you think you're going? Back to town, Alara said. I need supplies. No. He's not waking up, and I don't have what I need to figure out why. Garen's expression didn't change. You leave, you don't come back. Then he dies. Maybe. Garen tilted his head. Or maybe you're looking for an excuse to run. Alara's jaw tightened. I'm trying to save him. You already did. Now you stay and see it through. I can't see it through if he doesn't wake up. The shout echoed across the settlement. Wolves turned to look, and Alara felt the heat of their stares, but she didn't care. Garen stepped closer, his pale eyes boring into hers. You want to help him? Then stop thinking like a human and start thinking like pack. I don't know what that means. It means you don't run when things get hard. It means you fight. He gestured toward the healing den. He's alive because you fought for him once. Do it again. Elara's hands shook. I don't know how. Figure it out. Garen turned and walked away. She stood there breathing hard, anger and fear warring in her chest. Then Mira appeared at her elbow. He's right, Mira said quietly. Running won't fix this. I'm not running. I'm trying to get what I need. And what you need is already here. Mira nodded toward the den. You just haven't figured out how to use it yet. Elara wanted to argue, but the words died in her throat. Mira gripped her shoulder, the touch firm but not unkind. You're a healer, girl, so heal, but do it our way, not yours. She left Elara standing there, the weight of those words settling like stones in her gut. That night, Elara went back to the den and did something she'd been avoiding. She asked Kyle a question. What do you need? She whispered, her hand resting on his side. What am I missing? The black wolf didn't stir, but something shifted in the air, a change so subtle she almost missed it. Elara's eyes went to his face. His ear had flicked again, and this time his breathing hitched. She leaned closer. Kyle? His eyelid twitched. Can you hear me? Nothing. Elara bit her lip, frustration clawing at her. She'd been treating his body, but what if the problem wasn't physical? What if it was something else, something tied to whatever bond the pack kept talking about? She didn't understand it, didn't know how it worked, but she'd felt something in the clearing when she'd poured the seraphite into his wounds. A connection. A pull. What if that was still there? Elara closed her eyes and placed both hands on Kyle's chest, right over his heart. She didn't know what she was doing, didn't have a plan, but she focused on that pull, that thread of connection she'd felt days ago, and reached for it. The world tilted. For a split second, she wasn't in the den anymore. She was standing in darkness, vast and empty, and somewhere in that darkness, she felt him. Kyle. Not the wolf, not the body. Something deeper. A presence, trapped and struggling, like a man drowning beneath ice. Elara's breath caught. I'm here, she said, though she didn't know if the words were real or imagined. Come back. The presence turned toward her. She felt it, like a shift in the dark, and then the world snapped back into focus. Elara gasped, pulling her hands away. Kale's eye opened, gold, burning bright. He stared at her, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then his eye closed again, and his breathing evened out, deeper now, more natural. Elara sat back, heart racing. He hadn't fully woken, but she'd reached him. She was sure of it, and that meant he was still fighting. Well, by morning, word had spread. Elara stepped out of the den to find Garen waiting, Mira beside him. The settlement was buzzing, wolves moving in clusters, voices low and urgent. What happened? Garen demanded. Elara met his gaze. He's closer. I don't know how to explain it, but he's coming back. Garen's eyes narrowed. You're sure? Yes. Mira glanced at Garen, something unspoken passing between them. Torvin's called a gathering, Mira said. Tonight. He's pushing for a succession vote. Elara's stomach dropped. Can he do that? He can try. Garen's expression was grim. And if Kyle doesn't wake before then, he might succeed. How long do we have? Sunset. Elara looked at the sky. The sun was barely past dawn. Then I have until sunset, she said. Garen studied her. What are you planning? Something risky. Elara turned back toward the den. But if it works, Kyle will wake. And if it doesn't... She didn't finish the sentence. Mira's hand landed on her shoulder again, gripping tight. Do what you have to do. We'll handle Torvin. Elara nodded and went back inside. She had one shot at this, one chance to pull Kyle all the way back. And she was going to take it. The hours crawled by. Elara worked through the day, trying everything she could think of. She adjusted his bandages, checked his wounds, applied stimulants to his pressure points. She talked to him, her voice low and steady, telling him about the settlement, about the pack, about Torvin's gathering. Nothing worked. By mid-afternoon, panic was setting in. She sat beside him, head in her hands, trying to think. That connection she'd felt. It had been real. She knew it had. But she didn't know how to reach it again. Didn't know how to pull him back unless... Alara's head snapped up. The Seraphite had created the bond, or at least it had been the catalyst. What if she used it again? She didn't have any left. The vial was empty. But the pack had mentioned human medicine like it was foreign, dangerous. What if there was something here, something in their world that could do the same thing? Alara stood and went to find Mira. She found her near the fire pit, sharpening a blade. "I need your help," Alara said without preamble. Mira looked up. "With what? Is there anything, any plant, any root, anything that wolves use to pull someone back from the edge?" Mira frowned. "We don't use medicine the way you do. But there has to be something, some kind of remedy, something traditional." Mira was quiet for a moment. Then she set the blade down. "There's blackroot. Grows deep in the forest, near water. It's poisonous to most, but in small doses, it can shock the system. Wake someone up if they're too far gone." "Where can I find it?" "You can't. It's too dangerous, and you don't have time." "Then you get it." Mira's eyes sharpened. "You're asking me to bring you poison. I'm asking you to trust me." They stared at each other. Finally, Mira stood. "If this kills him, Garen will tear you apart. If I don't try, Torvin wins." Mira swore under her breath, then turned and shifted. She was gone before Alara could say thank you. Mira returned an hour before sunset, a bundle of blackroot clutched in her jaws. Alara took it, her hands shaking. The root was thick, gnarled, slick with moisture. It smelled like rot and earth, and just holding it made her skin itch. "How much?" Alara asked. "Too much, and his heart stops. Too little, and it does nothing." Mira shifted back to human form. "You're gambling with his life." "I know." Alara went back to the den and crushed a small piece of the root, mixing it with water until it formed a thin, dark liquid. She knelt beside Kael and pressed the bowl to his muzzle. "This is going to hurt," she whispered. "But you have to come back. Do you hear me? You have to wake up." She tipped the liquid into his mouth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Kael's body convulsed. His legs spasmed, claws scraping against stone. His breathing turned ragged, harsh, and his eye flew open, wide, wild, unseeing. Alara grabbed his head, holding him steady. "I'm here. I'm right here. Stay with me." His body shook violently, muscles seizing, and Alara's heart nearly stopped. Then, slowly, the convulsions eased. Kael's breathing steadied, his eye focused. On her. And for the first time, he shifted. It happened fast. Bones cracking, reshaping, fur receding. The black wolf collapsed inward, and a man took his place. He was tall, lean, with black hair that fell across his face and skin marked with scars. His eyes were the same burning gold, and they locked onto Alara with an intensity that stole her breath. "You," he rasped, his voice rough and broken. Alara's hands were still on his shoulders. "You're awake." Kael's gaze didn't waver. "What did you do to me?" "I saved you." "No." He pushed himself upright, wincing as his injuries pulled. "You did more than that." Alara pulled back, suddenly aware of how close they were. "I don't understand." "Neither do I." Kael's jaw tightened. "But we're going to find out." Outside, a howl rose, long, low, summoning. The gathering had begun. Kael's eyes flicked toward the entrance, then back to her. "Can you stand?" Alara asked. "I'll manage." He grabbed her arm, using her to pull himself to his feet. He swayed, but held. Alara steadied him. "You shouldn't be moving yet." "I don't have a choice." Kael's grip tightened. "And neither do you. We go together." "Why?" His golden eyes burned. "Because if Torvin sees you without me, he'll kill you where you stand." Alara's breath caught. "He'll what?" Kael didn't answer. He was already moving toward the entrance, his gait uneven but determined. She grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "You can barely stand," she hissed. "You're not going out there." He turned, and the look in his eyes stopped her cold. Not anger. Something worse. Resignation. "If I don't show myself now, Torvin will declare me unfit. The pack will vote him in as heir, and everything I've fought for dies with me." His voice was raw, stripped of anything but truth. "And then he'll come for you. Not because you saved me, because you're a loose end." I'm not your responsibility. Yes, you are. Kale's jaw tightened. The moment you used that medicine, you bound yourself to me. I didn't ask for it. You didn't understand it, but it's done. Ilara's hands curled into fists. So what? I walk out there and get torn apart because of some law I didn't agree to? No. Kale leaned heavily against the stone wall, his breathing labored. You walk out there and you stay beside me. You don't speak unless I tell you to. You don't run. And you sure as hell don't show fear. That's insane. That's survival. He pushed off the wall, swaying slightly. Now move, we're out of time. Ilara wanted to argue, wanted to tell him this was madness. But the howl outside rose again, longer this time, joined by others, and the sound sent ice down her spine. She stepped beside him. Kyle glanced at her, something almost like approval flickering across his face. Then he pushed the hide aside and stepped out into the dying light. Yabbed. The pack had gathered in a wide circle around the fire pit, more wolves than Ilara had seen since her arrival. They stood in both forms, some human, some wolf, all watching with eyes that gleamed in the firelight. The air was thick with tension, sharp as a blade. Torvin stood at the center. He was in human form, and the sight of him made Ilara's stomach turn. He was built like a brawler, broad shoulders, thick arms, scars that crisscrossed his chest and neck like trophies. His hair was dark, cropped close, and his eyes were a pale, cold gray that tracked Kyle's every movement. Well, Torvin said, his voice carrying across the circle. The dead rises. Kale stopped at the edge of the gathering, Ilara half a step behind him. His posture was rigid, but she could feel the tremor running through him, the effort it took just to stay upright. Not dead yet, Kale said. Torvin's smile was thin, sharp. Give it time. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd, not universal, but enough to sting. Garen stepped forward, his expression carved from stone. Kyle has returned. The gathering is over. Is it? Torvin tilted his head, his gaze sliding to Ilara. He's barely standing, and he's brought his human with him. Tell me, cousin, does she hold you up? Or is that the medicine talking? Kyle's hands clenched at his sides. Careful. Careful. Torvin laughed, the sound harsh and humorless. You've been unconscious for days, dragged back from the edge by a girl who doesn't belong here, and you want me to be careful? I'm not the one who needs a warning. Ilara felt every eye turn toward her, the weight of it pressed against her skin, suffocating. She saved my life, Kyle said, his voice steady despite the strain. That makes her pack business, not yours. Pack business. Torvin stepped closer, his boots crunching against gravel. Is that what we're calling it now? Because from where I stand, it looks like she's tied you to something none of us understand, something that weakens you. Kale's jaw worked. I'm not weak. Prove it. The words hung in the air like smoke. Kyle's breathing hitched, and Ilara saw the shift in his posture, the way his weight listed to one side, favoring the leg that wasn't fractured. You want a challenge? Kyle asked quietly. I want to know if you're fit to lead. Torvin's smile widened. And there's only one way to find out. Garen moved between them. This isn't the time. Kyle's injuries are his problem. Torvin's gaze didn't leave Kyle's face. He's had days to recover. If he's strong enough to stand here, he's strong enough to fight. Mira stepped forward, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Pack law says a challenge can be delayed if the accused is unfit. Pack law also says the accused has to prove unfitness. Torvin gestured to Kyle. He's on his feet. He's talking. He walked here himself. Looks fit to me. Ilara's pulse hammered in her ears. She looked at Garen, silently begging him to stop this, but his expression was grim, trapped. Kyle exhaled slowly. Fine. I accept. No, Ilara said, the word ripping out of her before she could stop it. Every head turned. Kyle's hand shot out, gripping her wrist hard enough to bruise. Don't. You're not ready, she said, voice low and urgent. You can barely stand. If you fight him now, I don't have a choice. Yes, you do. You can delay. Tell them you're not fit. And look weak in front of the entire pack? Kale's eyes burned. I'd be finished before the fight even started. You'll be finished if you do this. His grip tightened. Then you better hope I don't lose. He released her and stepped forward into the circle. Torvin grinned. Now we're talking. They cleared the space. Wolves moved back, forming a wide ring around the two men. The fire crackled and hissed, throwing shadows that danced across the ground. Alara stood at the edge, her nails digging into her palms, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Mira appeared beside her, silent. "Can he win?" Alara whispered. Mira's expression was unreadable. "He's alive, that's more than I expected." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Garen stepped into the center of the circle, his voice ringing out. "This is a challenge by combat. First blood or submission. The victor claims the right to lead. The defeated accepts the outcome or dies refusing." Alara's stomach lurched. "Dies?" Mira didn't look at her. "That's the law." Garen stepped back. "Begin." Torvin moved first. He didn't waste time posturing. He lunged, fast and brutal, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. His fist came up in a vicious arc, aimed at Kael's ribs, right where the worst of the wounds were. Kael twisted, barely avoiding the blow, and countered with a strike to Torvin's jaw. It connected, but weakly. Torvin absorbed it, grinning, and drove his knee into Kael's stomach. Kael doubled over, gasping. Alara's hands flew to her mouth. Torvin grabbed Kael by the hair and slammed him down onto the ground. The impact was sickening, a dull crack that echoed across the circle. Kael rolled, coughing, blood flecking his lips. "Get up," Torvin said, almost conversational. "You're embarrassing yourself." Kael pushed to his hands and knees, shaking. Alara took a step forward, but Mira's hand clamped down on her shoulder. "Don't," Mira said. You interfere, and they'll both die." Kael staggered upright, swaying. Torvin circled him, slow and deliberate. "You should have stayed down, cousin. Saved yourself the humiliation." Kael spat blood. "Not done yet." "Yes, you are." Torvin struck again, a brutal combination. Fist to the ribs, elbow to the face, a sweep that took Kael's legs out from under him. Kael hit the ground hard, and this time he didn't get up right away. The crowd murmured, restless. Alara's vision blurred. She couldn't watch this, couldn't stand here and do nothing while Kael got beaten into the dirt. But Mira's grip was iron. "Wait." Kael's hand twitched. Then he moved. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself up. His face was a mess. Split lip, blood streaming from his nose, one eye already swelling shut. But he stood. Torvin's grin faltered. "You really are stupid." Kael didn't answer. He just raised his fists. Torvin lunged again, but this time Kael was ready. He sidestepped, redirecting Torvin's momentum, and slammed his elbow into the back of Torvin's neck. Torvin stumbled, surprised, and Kael followed up with a knee to the ribs, hard, precise. Torvin grunted, spinning, but Kael was already moving, using his smaller frame to stay inside Torvin's reach, denying him space. The crowd's murmur shifted. Torvin swung wild, and Kael ducked under it, driving his fist into Torvin's liver. Torvin's breath exploded out of him, and for the first time he looked rattled. Kael didn't stop. He hit Torvin again and again, each strike calculated, aimed at weak points, solar plexus, kidneys, the inside of the thigh. Not the blows of a warrior, the blows of someone who couldn't afford to waste energy. Torvin roared and backhanded Kael across the face. Kael went down, hard. Alara's breath stopped. Torvin stood over him, breathing heavily. "Stay down." Kael's hand moved, fingers digging into the dirt. "I said stay down." Kael's laugh was broken, wet. "No!" He surged upward, faster than he should have been able to, and drove his shoulder into Torvin's midsection. They went down together, grappling, and Kael twisted, getting behind Torvin, locking his arm around his throat. A chokehold. Torvin's eyes went wide. He thrashed, clawing at Kael's arm, but Kael held on, his face twisted in pain and fury. The crowd was silent now, watching. Torvin's movements slowed. His struggles weakened. Kael's voice was a rasp in his ear. "Yield!" Torvin's hand slapped the ground once, twice. Submission. Kael released him and collapsed backward, gasping. The circle erupted. Some wolves howled, others shifted, agitated. Garen stepped forward, raising his hand for silence. "Kael wins," Garen said, his voice cutting through the noise. The challenge is over. Torvin rolled onto his side, coughing, his face dark with rage and humiliation. Kael lay on his back, chest heaving, staring up at the sky. Alara broke free from Mira's grip and ran. She dropped to her knees beside Kael, her hands hovering over him, not sure where to touch, where it wouldn't hurt. You idiot, she breathed. You complete idiot. Kael's eye, the one that wasn't swollen shut, found hers. Did I win? Yes. Good. His head lolled to the side. Then get me out of here before I pass out. Alara looked up, frantic. Help me! Mira was already there, shifting to wolf form. She crouched low, and together they managed to haul Kyle onto her back. Garen approached, his expression unreadable. Get him to the den, now. Alara didn't need to be told twice. Pause. The healing den was chaos. Kael's injuries from the fight had reopened half the wounds Alara had spent days closing. Blood soaked through the bandages, and his breathing was ragged, shallow. She worked frantically, stitching, cleaning, pressing down on the worst of the bleeding. Mira stayed, helping where she could, her hands steady even as Alara's shook. He shouldn't have fought, Alara said, her voice tight. He wasn't ready. He didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not here. Mira handed her a strip of clean cloth. Here, you fight or you die. That's the choice. Alara tied off a stitch, harder than necessary. It's a stupid system. It's our system. Kael groaned, his eyes fluttering open. Stop arguing. Alara leaned over him. You need to stay still. Can't. His hand moved weakly, reaching for her. Torvin, he'll come back. He lost. Garen said, Doesn't matter. Kael's fingers closed around her wrist. He won't accept it. Not like this. Mira's expression darkened. He's right. Torvin's humiliated. That makes him dangerous. Alara looked between them. So what do we do? We finish what we started. Kael's grip tightened. You keep me alive, I keep you safe, and we figure out what the hell this bond is before it kills us both. Alara stared at him. You think the bond is dangerous? I think it's the only thing keeping me upright. His golden eye locked onto hers. And I think it scares the hell out of everyone here. Before Alara could respond, a commotion erupted outside. Shouting, snarling, the sound of bodies colliding. Mira shifted instantly, moving to the entrance. Alara grabbed a blade, small, meant for cutting bandages, but sharp enough, and stepped in front of Kael. The hide was ripped aside. Torvin stood in the entrance, flanked by 3 wolves, all in their animal forms, all growling low. His face was a mask of rage. This isn't over. Garen appeared behind him, human, his voice cold. Yes, it is. You lost. He cheated, Torvin pointed at Alara. She did something to him. That's the only way he could have beaten me. You yielded, Garen said flatly. The fight was fair. Fair? Torvin's laugh was bitter. He used human tactics, tricks. That's not how we fight. He won, Mira said, stepping beside Garen. Deal with it. Torvin's gaze shifted to Kael, still lying on the platform, barely conscious. You want to lead this pack? Prove you can do it without her. Kael's voice was weak but clear. I don't need to prove anything to you. Then prove it to them. Torvin gestured to the wolves gathering outside, drawn by the noise. Break the bond. Send her away. Show the pack you're not compromised. Alara's heart stopped. Kael's hand tightened on her wrist. No. The word echoed in the silence. Torvin's eyes gleamed. No? She stays. Kael pushed himself upright, pain etched across his face. The bond is real. I don't understand it. She doesn't understand it, but it's not a weakness. It's the only reason I'm alive. Then you've chosen her over the pack. I've chosen survival. Kael's voice gained strength. And if you can't see the difference, you're not fit to lead. Torvin's face twisted. You're making a mistake. Maybe. Kael's gaze didn't waver. But it's mine to make. For a moment, Torvin looked like he might lunge. Then he turned and stormed out, his wolves following. The crowd outside dispersed slowly, murmuring. Garen stayed behind, his pale eyes on Kael. You just made an enemy for life. I know. And you've tied yourself to something none of us understand. I know that too. Garen's expression softened, just slightly. Then you better figure it out fast, because the pack won't tolerate uncertainty for long. He left. Alara lowered the blade, her hands shaking. You shouldn't have said that. Kael collapsed back onto the platform. Had to. Why? He looked at her, and for the first time she saw something raw in his expression, vulnerable. Because it's true, he said quietly. Whatever this is between us, it's real, and I'm not letting anyone take it from me. Alara's breath caught. Mira cleared her throat. I'll keep watch outside. She left them alone. Alara sat down beside Kael, her mind spinning. What happens now? Now? Kael closed his eyes. Now we hope I heal fast enough to deal with whatever Torvin does next. And if you don't, his hand found hers, fingers threading through hers. Then you run. As fast and as far as you can. Alara's throat tightened. I'm not leaving you. You might not have a choice. I didn't have a choice in that clearing either, she said, but I made one anyway. Kael's eye opened, meeting hers. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. He studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, small, pained, but real. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, or the most foolish. Maybe both. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. Either way, you're mine now, and I'm yours. That's the bond. That's what it means. Alara's heart hammered. I don't know what to do with that. Neither do I. His grip tightened, but we'll figure it out. Together. Outside, a wolf howled, long, mournful, carrying a warning. Kael's eyes snapped open. What was that? Alara asked. Mira burst through the entrance. We have a problem. Kael sat up, ignoring the pain. What kind of problem? The kind with teeth. Mira's expression was grim. Torvin just left the settlement, and he took half the pack with him. Kael was on his feet before Alara could stop him, his face draining of color. How many? 20, maybe more. Mira's voice was clipped, urgent. He's splitting the pack. Garen pushed into the den behind her, his expression carved from granite. It's worse than that. He took the young ones. The ones who don't remember what it was like before we had territory. The ones who think strength is the only thing that matters. Kael swayed, gripping the edge of the platform. Where did he go? North, toward the border settlements. Garen's pale eyes were hard. He's going to start a war. Alara's stomach dropped. With the humans? With anyone who gets in his way? Garen looked at Kael. He's going to force your hand, make you choose between the pack and keeping the peace. There's no choice. Kael's voice was steady, despite the pain etched across his face. I go after him. You can barely stand, Alara said. Doesn't matter. Yes, it does. She stepped in front of him, blocking his path. You go out there like this and he'll kill you. That's what he wants. Kael's jaw tightened. Then what do you suggest? Alara's mind raced. She looked at Garen, then Mira. How long before he reaches the settlements? Half a day. Maybe less if he's pushing hard, Mira said. Then we have time. For what? Kael asked. Alara turned back to him. To make sure you can actually fight when you catch up to him. His golden eyes narrowed. I just fought him. I won. You survived, Alara corrected. There's a difference, and if you go after him now in the state you're in, you won't survive again. Kael's hands curled into fists. I don't have time to rest. I'm not talking about rest. Alara grabbed her bag, the one she'd carried from town, mostly empty now, but still holding a few scraps of supplies. I'm talking about accelerating your recovery, pushing your body past what it should be able to handle. Mira stepped closer. That's dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous, Alara shot back. She pulled out a small vial, the last one she had, something she'd kept hidden even from herself. Clear liquid, faintly luminescent. This is concentrated adrenaline extract, mixed with a coagulant and a pain suppressant. It'll flood his system, force his body to burn through its reserves to heal faster. Garen's expression darkened. And the cost? He'll crash hard when it wears off. Maybe collapse. Maybe worse. Alara met Kael's eyes. But it'll give you a few hours at full strength. Maybe enough to stop Torvin before he starts a massacre. Kael stared at the vial. You've used this before? On soldiers. During border skirmishes. Alara's voice was quiet. Most of them survived. Some didn't. What are the odds? Better than if you go out there bleeding and half-conscious. The silence stretched. Garen spoke first. It's your call, Kael. Kael looked at Alara, and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. He held out his hand. Do it. Alara uncorked the vial. The injection went into the largest vein she could find, right at the crook of his elbow. Kael didn't flinch, but his breathing quickened as the liquid entered his bloodstream. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his pupils dilated and his entire body went rigid. Breathe, Alara said, her hand on his shoulder. Don't fight it. Kael's chest heaved, muscles locking, and then a shudder ran through him. His eyes snapped into focus, sharper than before, burning with an intensity that made Alara step back. How do you feel? She asked. Kael flexed his hands, testing. The tremor was gone. He stood straighter, the pain in his posture melting away like ice under heat. Like I could tear through a wall. That's the adrenaline talking. It won't last. How long do I have? 3 hours. Maybe 4 if you're lucky. Kael nodded once, then turned to Garen. Gather everyone who stayed. I want them ready to move in 10 minutes. Garen hesitated. Kael, even with this, I'm not asking. Kael's voice cut like a blade. Torvin's made his choice. Now I'm making mine. Garen held his gaze for a beat, then nodded and left. Mira lingered. You know this is exactly what he wants. A confrontation. A chance to finish what he started. I know. Kael grabbed a leather harness from a hook on the wall, strapping it across his chest. But I can't let him slaughter innocents just to get to me. You're thinking like a leader, Mira said. That's good, but don't forget to think like a survivor. She shifted and followed Garen out. Alara and Kael were alone. He turned to her, and the weight of his stare was almost physical. You're staying here. No. Alara, I just pumped you full of something that could kill you if it goes wrong, she said, her voice hard. If you think I'm letting you run off into a fight without me there to monitor your vitals, you're delusional. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. She stepped closer. You said it yourself. We're bound. Whatever happens to you happens to me. So stop pretending I'm not part of this. Kael's expression shifted, frustration, anger, and something softer underneath. If you come with me, and Torvin gets his hands on you, he won't. You don't know that. And you don't know that you'll survive the next 4 hours without me watching your back. Alara crossed her arms. So either we do this together, or you waste time arguing with me. Kael stared at her. Then slowly, a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. You're stubborn. So are you. He shook his head, almost amused. Fine. But you stay close, and if I tell you to run, you run. Deal. I mean it, Alara. She met his eyes. So do I. He moved toward her then, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. The drug already working through his system, burning hot. His hand came up, fingers brushing her cheek, and for a moment she thought he might say something else. Instead, he just nodded. Let's go. The pack that remained was smaller than Alara expected. 15 wolves, maybe 20, gathered in the clearing outside the den. They shifted between forms, restless, eyes flicking between Kael and the path leading north. Kael stepped into the center, and the murmurs died. He looked different now. The adrenaline had sharpened him, burned away the weakness. He stood tall, shoulders squared, and when he spoke, his voice carried across the settlement like thunder. Torvin has chosen to break from the pack. He's taken those who believe strength is the only thing that matters, that dominance is the only way to survive. Kael paused, his gaze sweeping the crowd. He's wrong. And if we let him reach those settlements, he'll prove to every human on the border that we're nothing but monsters. A young wolf, barely more than a teenager in human years, shifted and spoke up. His voice cracked with uncertainty. Why should we care what humans think? Kael's eyes locked onto him. Because we live on the edge of their world. Because if they decide we're a threat, they'll come for us with everything they have, and we'll lose. We're stronger than them, the boy insisted. Strength doesn't matter if you're outnumbered 100-1. Kael's voice hardened. Torvin's going to start a war we can't win, and I'm going to stop him. Garen stepped forward. Anyone who wants to stand with Kael, step forward now. Anyone who doesn't can leave, no judgment. For a moment, no one moved. The silence was suffocating. Elara could see the doubt in their faces, the fear. They'd just watched Kael nearly die in the challenge circle. They'd seen him collapse, and now he was asking them to follow him into another fight. Then Mira shifted to human form and stepped beside Kael. I'm with you. One by one, the others followed. Not all of them, but enough. The young wolf who'd questioned him stepped forward. Then an older female with scars across her muzzle. Then 3 more. Kael nodded. Then let's move. They traveled fast, cutting through the forest in a loose formation. Kael led, with Elara close behind, mounted on Mira's back. The wolves moved in silence, their paws barely making a sound on the forest floor. Elara's heart pounded in rhythm with Mira's gait. She kept her eyes on Kael, watching for signs that the drug was failing. So far he moved like he was uninjured, fluid, powerful, every step deliberate. But she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw stayed clenched. He was burning through energy faster than he should have been. After an hour, Garen dropped back beside them. He's holding up better than I expected. For now, Elara said, but when it wears off, he's going to crash hard. We need to reach Torvin before that happens. We're close. I can smell them. Elara's stomach tightened. How many? More than I'd like. Garen's expression was grim. And they're not alone. What do you mean? There are humans with them. I can smell gunpowder and blood. Elara's blood went cold. Torvin made a deal with hunters? Looks like it. Ahead, Kael slowed, raising a hand. The pack stopped. Through the trees, Elara could see lights, torches, and voices, human voices, rough and low, carrying threats and laughter. Kael shifted to human form, crouching low. Elara slid off Mira's back and crept forward beside him. They reached the edge of a clearing. Torvin was there, in human form, standing beside a group of men armed with rifles and blades. The men looked like border militia, hard-faced, scarred, the kind who made their living hunting predators. There were at least a dozen of them, maybe more in the shadows, and tied to a post in the center of the clearing were 3 people. Civilians, a man, a woman, and a girl no older than 10. The child was crying, her face pressed against her mother's shoulder. Elara's breath stopped. What is this? She whispered. Kael's jaw was tight, the muscles in his neck standing out like cords. Leverage. He's going to kill them and make it look like we did it. Why? To force the humans into retaliating, to start the war he wants. Kael's hands curled into fists. He'll leave the bodies where they'll be found, claw marks, bite marks, evidence that points to the pack. One of the hunters stepped forward, addressing Torvin. He was older than the others, with a scar running from his eye to his jaw. You said you'd give us the pack's location. That was the deal. Torvin smiled, cold and sharp. And I will, after you help me with one more thing. What thing? Torvin gestured to the captives. Kill them. Make it messy. Then we leave the bodies where Kael's wolves will find them. The humans will blame the pack and you'll have your hunt. The hunter frowned. That wasn't part of the agreement. It is now. Torvin's voice dropped. Dangerous. Unless you want to renegotiate. The hunter exchanged glances with his men. One of them spat tobacco juice onto the ground. The scarred leader scratched his jaw, considering. Fine, he said finally, but you better hold up your end. We want the whole pack, not just stragglers. You'll get them. Torvin's smile widened. Every last one. Elara's hands shook. We have to stop this. We will. Kael's eyes were locked on Torvin, burning with something beyond rage. But we do it smart. Garen, take half the pack and circle around. Cut off their escape. Mira, you're with me. Mira shifted and moved into position, silent as smoke. Kael looked at Elara. Stay here. Don't move until I signal. What's the signal? His smile was sharp, predatory. You'll know. Before she could argue, he was gone, melting into the shadows. Alara crouched at the tree line, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. She watched as Garen and the others disappeared into the forest, circling. Watched as the hunters moved closer to the captives, rifles at the ready. The little girl's crying had turned to quiet whimpering. The sound cut through Alara like a blade. Then Kael stepped into the clearing. Every head turned. The hunters raised their rifles. Torvin's smile widened into something vicious. "Well, well," Torvin said, spreading his arms in mock welcome. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Kael's voice was calm, deadly. "Let them go." "Why would I do that?" "Because this ends now, between you and me. No one else." Torvin laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "You think I'm stupid? You've got your pack hiding in the trees. I can smell them. I've got mine and a dozen armed humans. You're outnumbered." "Am I?" Kael raised his hand. Garen and the others emerged from the forest, surrounding the clearing. They moved with coordinated precision, cutting off every escape route. The hunters shifted nervously, rifles swinging between targets. One of them swore. "There's too many of them." Torvin's smile faltered. "You're bluffing." "Try me." For a moment, no one moved. The air was electric with tension, everyone waiting for someone else to make the first move. Then the scarred hunter spoke. "I didn't sign up to fight a whole pack. This is too much." Torvin rounded on him. "You'll do what you're paid to do." "Not for this." The hunter lowered his rifle. "We hunt strays, animals that attack livestock, not organized packs with twice our numbers. This is suicide." "You're cowards," Torvin snarled. "We're practical." The hunter gestured to his men. "We're out." They backed toward the trees, weapons still raised but retreating. Torvin looked like he might attack them himself, but he held back. His wolves, the ones who'd followed him, watched the humans go with something like relief in their eyes. When the hunters were gone, Torvin turned back to Kael. "Fine, just you and me then." "Not quite." Kael gestured and Mira stepped forward, moving toward the captives. She shifted to human form and began cutting the ropes with a blade she pulled from her belt. The family scrambled away the moment they were free, the father half carrying his daughter as they disappeared into the forest. The mother looked back once, her eyes finding Alara's across the clearing, and mouthed something that might have been, "Thank you." Torvin's face twisted with rage. "You just ruined everything." "Good." Torvin shifted, fast, brutal, and lunged. Kael met him head on. They collided in a tangle of claws and teeth, and the fight was savage from the first second. Torvin fought like a brawler, all power and rage, using his size and weight to try to overwhelm. Kael fought like a tactician, using speed and precision to stay one step ahead. But Alara could see the strain. The adrenaline was burning through him, and every strike cost more than it should have. His movements were still fast, still deadly, but there was a slight hitch in his left leg where the fracture hadn't fully healed. A moment's hesitation when Torvin caught him on his injured ribs. She started forward, but Garen's hand clamped down on her shoulder. "Let him finish it," Garen said. "He's going to get himself killed." "Maybe. But if you interfere, he'll never forgive you, and neither will they." Garen gestured to the pack, all watching with rapt attention. "This is about more than just stopping Torvin. It's about proving he can lead." Alara watched, helpless, as Kael and Torvin tore into each other. Blood sprayed across the dirt. Bones cracked. And still, they fought. Torvin caught Kael with a vicious swipe across the face, and Kael went down. Torvin was on him immediately, claws aimed at his throat. Kael rolled, barely avoiding the strike, and came up inside Torvin's guard. He drove his shoulder into Torvin's chest, using leverage instead of strength, and sent him sprawling. "You're getting slow," Kael said, breathing hard. Torvin pushed to his feet, blood dripping from a gash across his shoulder. "And you're getting desperate." They circled each other, both wounded, both bleeding. The wolves who'd followed Torvin were watching now, their earlier certainty replaced by doubt. Then Kael made a mistake. He overextended on a strike, and Torvin caught him by the throat, slamming him into the ground hard enough to crack stone. Alara screamed. Torvin raised his claws, ready to end it. "Any last words, cousin?" Kael's eyes burned gold through the blood. "You were right," he rasped, "about one thing. Torvin hesitated. What? I am different now. Kale's voice was quiet, but it carried. Because she made me see that strength isn't everything. It's what you do with it that matters. Who you protect, what you stand for. He twisted, breaking Torvin's grip with a move that shouldn't have worked. A human technique, using leverage and momentum instead of brute force. His claws drove into Torvin's side, finding the soft space between ribs. Torvin howled, stumbling back. Kale rose, blood dripping from his wounds, and stood over him. Yield. Torvin spat blood onto the ground. Never. Then you're banished. Take your wolves and leave. If you ever come back, I'll kill you myself. Torvin's eyes blazed with hate, but Alara could see the calculation there. He was beaten, and he knew it. His wolves knew it too. This isn't over, Torvin said, his voice thick with venom. Yes, it is. Kale's voice was final. Go, now! Torvin shifted, limping, and disappeared into the trees. His wolves followed, one by one, until only Kael's pack remained. The clearing fell silent. Kael swayed, and Alara broke free from Garen's grip, running to him. She caught him before he fell, his weight nearly taking her down with him. I've got you, she said, her voice breaking. Did we win? He asked, his voice faint. Yes, you won. His eyes closed, and he collapsed in her arms. They carried him back to the den. Alara worked through the night, stitching, cleaning, monitoring. The adrenaline had burned through his reserves completely, and his body was shutting down, trying to recover from weeks' worth of damage compressed into hours. His pulse was thready, his breathing shallow. Twice, she thought she'd lost him, but he was alive. Mira stayed with her, helping where she could, bringing water and clean bandages. Garen stood guard outside, turning away anyone who tried to enter. By morning, the worst had passed. Kael's breathing evened out, and his pulse grew stronger. The color started to return to his skin. Alara sat beside him, exhausted, her hands stained with his blood. You should rest, Mira said quietly. I'm fine. You're going to collapse. Not yet. Alara looked at Kael's face, finally peaceful in sleep. Not until I know he's stable. Mira studied her for a long moment. You really care about him? It wasn't a question, but Alara answered anyway. Yes. Why? You barely know him. I know enough. Alara's voice was soft. I know he's worth fighting for. Mira nodded slowly. The pack's gathering outside. They want to see him. He's not awake yet. Doesn't matter. They need to know he's alive. Alara looked at Kael, then nodded. Garen pushed the hide aside and the pack filed in, one by one. Not just those who had stayed, but others, wolves who had heard what happened, who had seen Kael stand against Torvin and win. Even some of the ones who'd followed Torvin initially had returned, shamefaced and uncertain. They didn't speak. They just looked at him, and then at her. And slowly, one by one, they bowed. Not to Kael, to her. Alara's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say, what to do. This wasn't her world, these weren't her people, but they were bowing to her anyway. When the last wolf left, Kael's eye opened. They bowed to you, he said, his voice hoarse but clear. They bowed to us, Alara corrected. He smiled, faint but real. You're packed now, whether you like it or not. I think I'm okay with that. His hand found hers, fingers threading through hers with surprising strength. Good, because I'm not letting you go. Even if I wanted to leave? Especially then. His golden eye held hers. You saved me, twice. That's a debt I can never repay. I don't want repayment. What do you want? The question hung between them, weighted with meaning. Alara looked at their joined hands, at the scars on his skin, at the life she'd stepped into without understanding what it would cost. I want to stay, she said quietly, if you'll have me. Kael's grip tightened. Always. Outside, a howl rose, not a warning this time, but a celebration. The pack was singing, their voices joining in a harmony that spoke of survival, of victory, of something new being born from the ashes of the old. Alara listened, and for the first time since she'd found Kael dying in that clearing, she felt something like hope. What happens now? She asked. Now? Kale's smile widened. Now we rebuild. Together. The pack will have questions about the bond, about what it means. Let them ask. Kale's voice was stronger now, determination replacing the exhaustion. We'll figure it out as we go. And Torvin? He'll lick his wounds and try again eventually. Men like him always do. Kale's expression hardened. But next time we'll be ready. We, Alara repeated, testing the word. We, Kale confirmed. We, Alara repeated, testing the word. We, Kale confirmed. The howling outside continued, rising and falling like waves against a shore. Alara listened to it, feeling the vibration of it in her chest, and realized something had shifted. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the wolves. Not of this place. Not even of what she'd become by choosing to stay. Kale's breathing had evened out, his grip on her hand loosening as sleep pulled him under again. Alara carefully extracted her fingers and stood, her body protesting every movement. She'd been awake for nearly 2 days straight, running on nothing but adrenaline and stubbornness. Mira appeared in the entrance. You need to rest. I will, soon. Alara, I need to check the perimeter first. Make sure everyone who came back is actually staying. Alara grabbed her bag, mostly empty now except for a few basic supplies. And I need to see if any of Torvin's wolves are injured. They might not trust me, but they need medical attention. Mira's expression softened. You really are pack now, aren't you? Apparently. Alara managed a tired smile. Still getting used to it. She stepped outside into the early morning light. The settlement looked different somehow, less hostile, less foreign. Wolves moved between the structures, some in human form, others still on 4 legs. They glanced at her as she passed, and instead of suspicion in their eyes, she saw something else. Respect. The young wolf who'd questioned Kyle before the march north approached her, shifting as he walked. By the time he reached her, he was human, gangly, maybe 16, with dark hair that stuck up in odd angles. Is he going to be okay? The boy asked. Yes. He needs rest, but he'll recover. The boy nodded, relief washing over his face. I'm sorry for what I said before, about not caring what humans think. You were scared, Alara said. That's not something to apologize for, but I was wrong. The boy's jaw tightened. Kael showed me that. If we'd let Torvin kill those people, we'd all be hunted, every one of us. What's your name? Rion. Well, Rion, you followed him when it mattered. That takes courage. The boy straightened a little, pride flickering in his eyes. Thank you for saving him, twice. He shifted back to wolf form and loped away before Alara could respond. She continued through the settlement, checking on the wolves who'd been injured in the confrontation. Most of the wounds were minor, scratches, bruises, one dislocated shoulder that Mira had already popped back into place. But 3 of Torvin's former followers had more serious injuries, and they watched her approach with wary eyes. I'm a healer, Alara said quietly, kneeling beside the first one, a female with a deep gash across her flank. I'm not here to hurt you. The wolf growled low. I know you don't trust me. I wouldn't either. But if you let that wound fester, you'll lose the leg. The wolf's ears flattened, but she didn't move away. Alara worked quickly, cleaning and stitching the wound while the wolf trembled under her hands. When she finished, she moved to the next one, then the next. None of them thanked her, but none of them tried to bite her either. Progress. By the time she finished, the sun was fully up, and her hands were shaking from exhaustion. She returned to the healing den to find Garen waiting outside. You should be resting, he said. Everyone keeps telling me that. Because it's true. Garen's pale eyes studied her. You're no good to anyone if you collapse. I'm fine. You're running on fumes. He gestured toward the den. Kael's stable. The pack's calm. There's nothing that can't wait a few hours. Alara wanted to argue, but her legs chose that moment to buckle slightly. Garen caught her elbow, steadying her. See? She sighed. Fine. A few hours. Good. Garen released her. There's something else you should know. A messenger came from the border settlements. The family you saved, they're telling everyone what happened, how the wolves stopped the attack, not caused it. Alara's breath caught. That could change things. Maybe. Or it could make things worse. Humans don't like having their beliefs challenged. Garen's expression was grim. But it's a start. He left her alone and Ilara pushed back into the den. Kael was still asleep, his breathing deep and even. She lay down on the furs beside the platform, intending to rest for just a moment. She was asleep before her head hit the ground. She woke to voices, angry voices, arguing just outside the den. Ilara sat up, disoriented, her body protesting the sudden movement. How long had she been asleep? The light filtering through the hide suggested late afternoon. She pushed to her feet and stepped outside. A crowd had gathered near the fire pit. 20 wolves, maybe more. Some in human form, others not. Garen stood at the center, facing down a group of older pack members. Their expressions were hostile, arms crossed, postures defensive. "What's going on?" Ilara asked. One of the older wolves, a grizzled male with gray fur and scars crisscrossing his muzzle, turned to her. When he spoke, his voice was rough, accented. "You're what's going on." Ilara's stomach tightened. "I don't understand." "The bond," another one said, this one female, her human form showing streaks of white through her dark hair. "Between you and Kael, it's not natural." "I didn't create it," Ilara said carefully. "I just saved his life." "That's the problem." The male stepped closer. "Our laws are clear. A life debt is temporary. It ends when the debt is repaid. But what you've done, it's permanent. It's tied him to you in ways we don't understand. Then we figure it out," Ilara said. "Together." "You're human," the female spat. "You don't belong here. You shouldn't even be alive walking through our settlement like you have a right." Garen's voice cut through. "She has every right. She's proven herself." "By manipulating our heir?" "By saving him," Garen shot back. "Twice. And by standing with him against Torvin when she could have run." "She's changed him," the male insisted. "Made him weak. He uses human tactics now, fights like them, thinks like them." "He wins," Mira said, appearing beside Garen. "That's what matters." "No!" The male's eyes blazed. "What matters is preserving who we are, our strength, our traditions. She's poison, and she'll destroy us from the inside if we let her stay." The crowd murmured, some in agreement, others uncertain. Ilara felt the weight of their stares, the hostility pressing against her like a physical thing. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but a voice from behind stopped her. "Enough!" Kael stepped out of the healing den. He looked terrible, pale, moving stiffly, one eye still swollen half shut. But he stood straight, and his voice carried. "You want to talk about the bond?" Kael moved toward the fire pit, each step deliberate. "Then let's talk about it." The crowd parted for him. "I didn't ask for this," Kael said. Neither did she. But it happened. And you know what I've learned? It's not a weakness. It's a strength. "You're delusional," the grizzled male said. She's made me see that survival isn't just about being the strongest or the fastest." Kael's golden eyes swept the crowd. "It's about adapting, using every advantage, being smart enough to know when to fight and when to find another way." "That's not our way," the female said. "Maybe it should be." Kael's voice hardened. "Our way got me ambushed and left for dead. Our way let Torvin nearly start a war that would have wiped us out. Our way is killing us, and you're too blind to see it." The silence that followed was deafening. "I'm not saying we abandon who we are," Kael continued. "But we need to evolve. And if that means learning from humans, from Ilara, then so be it." The grizzled male's lip curled. "Then you're not fit to lead. Then challenge me." Kael spread his arms. "Right now, in front of everyone. Let's settle this the old way." The male hesitated. "No?" Kael lowered his arms. "Then accept that things are changing, or leave like Torvin did." "You'd exile us for disagreeing with you?" "I'd exile you for putting your pride over the pack's survival." Kael's gaze didn't waver. "The choice is yours." The male looked around, seeking support from the others. Some met his eyes, but most looked away. Finally, he shifted to wolf form and stalked off into the trees. The female followed, along with 2 others. The rest stayed. Kael swayed slightly, and Ilara moved to his side, steadying him. He leaned on her, just a little, and she felt the tremor running through him. "You shouldn't be up," she muttered. "Had to be." His voice was low, meant only for her. They needed to see. Garen approached. You just split the pack again. I know. Kale straightened, pulling away from Alara, though it clearly cost him. But I'd rather have a smaller pack that's united than a larger one that's broken. Mira nodded slowly. That's the first truly wise thing I've heard you say. Despite everything, Kale smiled. Don't get used to it. The crowd began to disperse, the tension easing but not disappearing entirely. Alara could feel the undercurrent of uncertainty, the fear of change. But she could also feel something else, a fragile hope. Come on, she said to Kyle. You need to rest. I need to rest, Alara interrupted firmly. The pack will still be here when you wake up. Kale looked like he wanted to argue, but exhaustion won out. He nodded and let her guide him back to the den. Ushab. 3 days passed. Kyle recovered slowly, his body finally catching up with the damage it had sustained. Alara stayed close, monitoring him, adjusting his treatment as needed. The pack gave them space, though she could feel their eyes on her whenever she moved through the settlement. On the 4th day, a visitor arrived. Alara was grinding herbs outside the den when she heard the commotion. Wolves were gathering near the settlement's entrance, their postures alert but not hostile. She stood, wiping her hands on her pants, and walked over. A man stood at the edge of the clearing, hands raised in a gesture of peace. He was middle-aged, dressed in simple clothing, with a rifle slung over his shoulder but not in his hands. Behind him, partially hidden in the trees, were others, humans, watching nervously. Garen was already there, in human form, blocking the man's path. State your business, Garen said. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm from the settlement 3 miles north. The man's voice was steady, but Alara could see the fear in his eyes. I'm here to speak with the one who saved my family. Alara's breath caught. That would be me, she said, stepping forward. The man's eyes found hers, and his expression crumpled. It's true, then. You're with them. I am. They said you were dead. The council said you'd been killed by wolves when you went into the forest. Alara's throat tightened. I'm very much alive. I can see that. Marcus's hands lowered slowly. My daughter, Emma, she wanted to come thank you herself, but I couldn't risk it, not with the way people are talking. What are they saying? That wolves saved us from hunters, that one of them spoke, that you were there, helping them. Marcus shook his head. Half the town thinks I'm lying. The other half wants to organize a hunting party. Garen tensed. If they come here. They won't, Marcus said quickly. I'm doing everything I can to stop it, but people are scared, and scared people do stupid things. What do you want from us? Kael's voice came from behind Alara. She turned to see him approaching, still moving carefully but upright. Marcus stared at him, and Alara saw the moment of recognition, understanding that this was the wolf, the heir, the one who'd fought Torvin. I want to make a deal, Marcus said. Kael's eyes narrowed. What kind of deal? You leave our settlements alone. Don't hunt our livestock. Don't threaten our people. In return, I'll do everything in my power to keep the hunters away from your territory. You can't promise that, Garen said. No, but I can try. Marcus looked between them. I know what you did. You could have let Torvin kill us, could have stayed hidden, but you didn't. That means something. Kael was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. We'll honor that, as long as your people honor it in return. They will, or I'll make them. Marcus's jaw set. I owe you my daughter's life. That's not a debt I take lightly. He turned to leave, then paused, looking back at Alara. Your mentor wants you to know you're not welcome back. The council's declared you a traitor. The words hit harder than Alara expected. She'd known, on some level, that going back wasn't an option, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. I understand, she said quietly. For what it's worth, I think they're wrong. Marcus's expression softened. You did the right thing, both times. He disappeared into the trees, his people following. The clearing fell silent. Alara stood there, processing what had just happened. She'd saved Kyle, saved his pack, helped stop a war. And in doing so, she'd lost her home, her profession, everything she'd known. Kael's hand found hers. You okay? I don't know. She looked at him. I just became an exile from my own people. Welcome to the club. His smile was gentle. But you're not alone. No, Alara agreed, looking around at the wolves watching them. I guess I'm not. That night, Garen called a gathering. The entire pack assembled around the fire pit, the flames casting dancing shadows across their faces. Alara stood beside Kael, her heart pounding. She didn't know what this was about, but the formality of it made her nervous. Garen stepped into the center of the circle. We've been through something these past weeks, something that's tested us, changed us, and we've survived. But survival isn't enough anymore. We need to decide who we are, what we stand for. He looked at Kael. You've shown us a different path, one that doesn't rely solely on strength, and some of us don't like it, but I think most of us recognize that it works. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Which is why I'm stepping down, Garen said. The murmurs turned to shocked silence. You're what? Kael said, his voice sharp. I'm old, Kael, older than I look, and I'm tired. Garen's pale eyes held steady. I've led this pack through wars and famines and hunts, but this? What's coming? That needs someone younger, someone who can see beyond the old ways. You can't just, I can, and I am. Garen smiled faintly. The pack needs you, not me. He turned to the assembled wolves. By the old law, a leader steps down by naming his successor. I name Kael Draven. Anyone who challenges this, speak now. No one spoke. Garen nodded, satisfied. Then he did something that made Alara's breath catch. He bowed to Kael. And one by one, every wolf in the circle did the same. Kael stood frozen, clearly overwhelmed. Alara squeezed his hand, grounding him. When he finally found his voice, it was rough. I accept, but I don't do this alone. He turned to Alara. Our bond, whatever it is, it's real. It's strong. And it's the reason I'm standing here. So if you'll accept me as your leader, you accept her too. As my equal. As pack. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Then Mira stepped forward. I accept. Ryan was next. I accept. One by one, they voiced their acceptance. Not all of them. Some stayed silent, uncertain. But enough. Garen shifted to wolf form and howled, a long, mournful note that spoke of endings and beginnings. The pack joined him, their voices rising into the night sky. Alara felt tears sting her eyes. She didn't understand half of what had just happened, but she understood enough. She belonged here now. Truly belonged. Weeks passed, and the settlement changed. Kael implemented new rules, ones that emphasized cooperation over dominance, strategy over brute strength. Some of the older wolves left, unwilling to adapt, but younger ones stayed, and new ones arrived, drawn by stories of a pack that was different. Alara established a proper healing den, training some of the younger wolves in basic medicine. She taught them about herbs and poultices, about treating wounds and recognizing infections. They taught her about wolf physiology, about shifting and the toll it took on the body. Marcus kept his word. The human settlement stayed away, and hunting parties stopped venturing into pack territory. It wasn't peace exactly, but it was close. Torvin remained in exile, and rumors reached them occasionally. Whispers of him gathering followers, building his own pack in the deep wilderness. Kael sent scouts to monitor him, but took no action. He'll come back eventually, Mira said one evening, as they stood watch on the settlement's edge. I know, Kael replied, but when he does, we'll be ready. Alara listened to them, standing close enough to Kael that their shoulders touched. The bond between them had grown stronger, more defined. She could feel his emotions sometimes, flashes of anger, moments of contentment, the constant underlying current of protectiveness. And he could feel hers. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt right. Do you ever regret it? Kael asked her later when they were alone in the healing den. Saving me? Staying here? Alara considered the question. She thought about her old life, the clinic, her mentor, the human world she'd left behind. She thought about the danger she'd faced, the pain, the uncertainty. No, she said finally. I don't regret it. Even though you lost everything? I didn't lose everything. She turned to face him. I found something better. Kael's hand came up, cupping her face. His thumb brushed across her cheek, and the touch sent warmth spreading through her. I don't deserve you. he said quietly. Probably not. Alara smiled. But you're stuck with me anyway. He laughed, the sound low and genuine. Then he kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, like they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. But then it deepened, became something more. A promise, a claim, an acknowledgement of everything they'd been through and everything still to come. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Cale rested his forehead against hers. Whatever happens, he said, we face it together. Together, Alara agreed. Outside, the pack was settling in for the night. Alara could hear them. Low conversations, the rustle of movement, the occasional howl in the distance. This was her life now. Her pack. Her home. And she wouldn't change a thing. But 3 months later, a messenger arrived from the human settlements. It was Marcus again. But this time he brought others. Town leaders, merchants, even a representative from the regional council. They came to negotiate. Not to threaten or demand. To negotiate. Kyle met them at the border, with Garen, Mira, and Alara beside him. The talks lasted hours, sometimes heated, often tense. But they talked. By the end, they had an agreement, a fragile one, built on mutual benefit and cautious trust. The humans would stay out of pack territory. The wolves would protect the border settlements from raiders and predators. Trade would be established, herbs and medicines from the wolves in exchange for tools and supplies from the humans. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. When the humans left, Kael turned to Alara. You did this. We did this, she corrected. No, he shook his head. You saved one life, one wolf, and it changed everything. Alara looked at the settlement, at the wolves moving through it, at the structures they'd built, at the future they were creating together. I guess it did, she said softly. Kael pulled her close, and she leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The pack gathered around them, drawn by some unspoken instinct, and together they watched the day end and the night begin. One choice. One act of mercy. One decision to save a life when every rule said to let it die. That's all it had taken to change everything. And as the first stars appeared overhead, Alara knew with absolute certainty that she'd make the same choice again. Every time. Because this family, this pack, this life, was worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth living for. The pack howled, their voices rising together in harmony, and Alara closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. She was home.